The sound of the slap was louder than the rain. Sandra's head snapped sideways. Her cheek exploded with pain, heat blooming under her skin. She staggered a little, barely catching the silver tray before it crashed to the floor. On it, 2 packs of spaghetti wobbled dangerously, nearly toppling over. Rainwater dripped from her uniform, cold and steady, soaking into the polished marble tiles beneath her shoes. She stood still in the middle of the living room, blinking against the sting in her eyes. Her black and white maid outfit was soaked. Her shoes squeaked with every tiny movement. Across from her, Cynthia stood poised like a queen, wrapped in a silk robe that shimmered gold beneath the chandelier. Her hair fell straight and perfect down her back, red nails gleaming like weapons at her side. Her expression was cold, dismissive, as if Sandra was a dirty stain she regretted noticing. "You must be out of your mind," Cynthia hissed, her voice sharp enough to slice glass. 40 minutes. I sent you for groceries, not on a rescue mission." Sandra's lips parted. She hadn't even spoken yet when Cynthia raised her hand again. A silent warning. "One more word and you get another." "I saw you," Cynthia said, her voice dropping into something crueler. "Do you think I'm stupid? You think I don't have cameras?" She grabbed the TV remote from the table and pointed it at the wall. The massive screen flickered on, then displayed the security footage. Sandra felt her stomach twist. There she was, caught by the CCTV outside the mansion gate. Rain soaked her already. She was kneeling beside someone, an old woman, fragile and hunched. Then came the moment Sandra had dreaded. On screen, she lifted the woman onto her back, holding a grocery bag in one hand. Cynthia pressed pause. Sandra stared at the frozen image, her bent body, her wet clothes, the helpless woman clutching her shoulder. "You turned yourself into a savior," Cynthia said with a sneer. "A poor maid, playing Florence Nightingale, while I sat here waiting for my things." Sandra tried to speak. She couldn't walk. Shut up," Cynthia screamed. The echo of her voice rolled through the grand room. She marched over, grabbed Sandra's small black bag, and hurled it at her feet. "You're done here. Out. Now." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Sandra didn't move. Her hands were shaking. Her heart beat against her ribs like it was trying to escape. This wasn't just about losing a job. This was her room behind the house. Her meals. Her salary. Her last ounce of security. "Please," she whispered. "I have nowhere to go." Cynthia leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "You had time to carry a stranger," she said. "Now carry your bag and leave." The finality in her voice left no space for argument. Behind her, Sandra noticed the house staff peeking from the hallway, silent, wide-eyed, terrified. No one dared say a word. Sandra bent slowly, picked up her bag, and turned toward the door. Her legs felt like wet concrete. Her cheeks still throbbed. As her hand closed around the doorknob, one thought screamed in her head. "I lost my job because I stopped to help someone." She stepped outside. The cold evening air rushed into her lungs like a slap of its own. Rain had slowed to a drizzle. Puddles glistened on the ground. A tricycle rolled past, its engine coughing in the distance. Sandra didn't cry. Not yet. Her face burned, but her eyes were dry. She walked down the street, one step at a time. And she didn't know it yet, but this was the moment her entire life began to change. Just a few hours earlier, the sky had been heavy and low, like it carried too many secrets. Rain had just stopped falling, leaving behind the scent of wet dust and dying leaves. Sandra hurried down the sidewalk with a nylon grocery bag in one hand. Her uniform was already damp. She hated being late. Cynthia hated it more. The gate to the mansion was just ahead when a voice stopped her. "Help me, please. I am dying." Sandra froze. She looked around, startled. The street was quiet, cars passing occasionally, people walking with umbrellas tucked under their arms. "Please, I cannot walk." The voice was faint. It came from behind the wall. She moved closer and peeked around the corner. There, huddled against the concrete, was an old woman. Her hair was gray and scattered across her wet face. Her wrapper was soaked through, clinging to thin legs like second skin. Her arms were shaking. Sandra's heart clenched. She rushed forward. "Mama, can you hear me?" The woman's lips trembled. I can't move. My legs. I live 2 streets away. Sandra looked at the groceries, then at the gate. She could already imagine Cynthia's face, her voice, but she also heard her mother's words, clear as the rain itself. Be kind, even when it costs you. I'll help you, Sandra said softly. She tried to lift the woman, but her knees buckled. Sorry, Sandra muttered, then turned around and crouched low. Let me carry you. She pulled the woman's arms over her shoulders, braced herself, and stood. The woman was light, but not weightless. Her breath felt hot against Sandra's neck. With one hand holding the groceries, Sandra began to walk. Mama, just hold on, she whispered. Cars passed. A couple people slowed down, stared. No one stopped. Please, she called out. She needs help. Nothing. So Sandra walked. The wet pavement slapped beneath her shoes. Her muscles screamed. The grocery bag cut into her fingers. How far? She asked, her breath short. Almost, the woman whispered. Finally, the woman pointed. There. It wasn't a house. It was a makeshift shelter, wooden sticks, torn nylon, and a fraying mat. Sandra stared. This is your home? The woman nodded weakly. Sandra lowered her gently onto the mat. Mama, I'm so sorry. The woman looked up and smiled faintly. My name is Sarah. People used to call me Madam Sarah. Sandra blinked. You rest here, Mama. I'll get something for you. She dashed to a kiosk, bought a loaf of bread, a small tin of milk. She borrowed hot water and returned with a warm drink. The woman's hands shook as she ate. God will bless you, she said quietly. Sandra smiled, though her heart was heavy. I have to go now, but I'll come check on you again. Then she turned and walked away, not knowing how late it was or what it would cost her. Now she stood at the roadside again, her bag in hand, her cheeks still burning. The gate behind her stayed closed. Her life, at least the one she knew, was over. But somewhere beyond this cold street and empty pockets, something else waited for her. She just didn't know it yet. Sandra didn't sleep that night. She lay curled on her old mattress, the springs poking at her side like tiny reminders of everything she had lost. The room felt even smaller than usual. The flickering bulb above her buzzed like an annoying thought she couldn't shut off. Outside, the generator from the next compound roared on and off, loud and stubborn. But none of that was why she couldn't sleep. It was the image of Madame Sarah, alone in that torn shelter, shivering, dying. And then there was Cynthia's hand across her face. The sting of it, the humiliation, the cold command in her voice, get out. Sandra hadn't even been allowed to change her clothes before she was thrown out. Her damp uniform clung to her skin like regret. She sat up slowly, arms around her knees. Was it worth it? She had no job now, no income, no home, except this cramped box of a room she barely managed to rent from her last paycheck. The last money she had, she spent on bread and milk for a woman who couldn't even stand. But somewhere in the silence, her father's voice whispered, soft and steady. Kindness is a seed. It might fall on stone, but one day it will find soil. At 6:10 a.m., Sandra got up. She didn't think. She just moved. She washed her face in the plastic bowl near the door, slipped on her mother's old yellow gown, and tied her hair back in a bun with frayed ends. Her black slippers squeaked as she stepped outside. The street was already alive, early morning chaos. Hawkers shouting prices, drivers arguing, smoke curling from roadside frying pans. But Sandra walked through it all like a ghost. Her heart beat faster with every step. What if Madame Sarah didn't make it through the night? What if she came too late? The closer she got to the shelter, the tighter her chest became. And then she saw her. Alive. Awake. But barely. Madame Sarah was sitting up, leaning against the wall. Her hands trembled as she tried to wrap her tattered cloth around her thin legs. Her breathing was shallow, her lips dry and cracked. Sandra rushed forward. Mama, you're awake. How do you feel? Did you sleep at all? Madame Sarah looked at her with tired, grateful eyes. My child, you came back. Sandra knelt beside her and touched her forehead. It was hot, far too hot. You're burning up, she whispered. It's the cold, the rain. Madame Sarah nodded weakly. No, Mama, you can't stay here. You'll die here. The old woman looked around her fragile shelter. Her eyes clouded with shame. "This is all I have," she said. "Not anymore," Sandra said. She stood up, scanned the road, and waved her hand at a passing tricycle. "Oh, block 10, she told the driver quickly. "Please hurry." The man looked at the old woman. "Auntie looks sick." "She is," Sandra said, helping her into the back seat. "Please go fast." They arrived at Sandra's room 10 minutes later. Small, bare, a mattress on the floor, a plastic table with 2 cracked stools, a single curtain blowing in the breeze, some rice and Gary on a wooden shelf, a window that never really closed, but was home, and it was warm. Sandra helped Madame Sarah inside. "Sit here, Mama," she said, guiding her to the mattress. She placed a pillow behind her back and opened the window halfway. "I'll make food." She lit her small stove, boiled rice, added pepper sauce from the night before, and served it with cool water. After eating, Madame Sarah looked a little better. A spark returned to her eyes. "You shouldn't have done this," she murmured. "I've caused you trouble." Sandra shook her head. "No, you didn't. I chose to help you, and I don't regret it." But that night, things took a turn. Madame Sarah couldn't stand. Her breathing worsened. Her hands trembled even when still. Her lips turned pale. Sandra panicked. She had no money left. She sat at the edge of the mattress, watching the woman's chest rise and fall too slowly. What should I do? Then an idea. Risky. Desperate. She grabbed her cracked old phone, opened the camera, and took a photo of Madame Sarah, weak, lying on the mattress. Her fingers trembled as she typed. "I helped this amazing old woman yesterday. I don't know her family. She's very sick and needs medical help. If anyone can assist, please contact me. We're at Block 10, Oy Road. Please help us save her." She read it twice. Then she posted it everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp status. She put the phone down and waited. "God, please," she whispered. "Let someone see. Let someone care." Across the city, in a glass tower above Victoria Island, a billionaire named Harrison Andrew was reviewing documents. His phone buzzed. He almost ignored it. Then he saw the picture, shared by a friend. He froze, zoomed in. The woman on the mattress. That gray hair. Those eyes. It couldn't be. His chest tightened. His hand trembled. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "Driver, bring the car. Now." Within minutes, a convoy of black SUVs tore through Lagos like a bullet through water. Sandra sat beside Madame Sarah, wiping sweat from her forehead. The room smelled of fear, of cheap antiseptic, of worry. A knock. She jumped, opened the door, and froze. A tall man in an expensive suit stood before her. Guards behind him. A line of cars outside. His eyes were red already. "My name is Harrison," he said softly. "I came because of the woman in your post." Sandra stepped aside, barely able to speak. Harrison walked into the room. When he saw Madame Sarah, he dropped to his knees. "It's me," his voice cracked. "The boy you helped." Madame Sarah opened her eyes weakly. "Harrison," she whispered. Then she fainted. Sandra screamed. Harrison scooped her into his arms. "Get the car ready. Now." Sandra grabbed her slippers and ran after them. The convoy peeled off toward the hospital like a storm. And in that moment, Sandra's life veered off its old road into something bigger, deeper, and completely unknown. The hospital swallowed them whole. Glass doors slid open with a soft whoosh as Harrison stormed through, carrying Madame Sarah in his arms. His suit was wet with her sweat, but he didn't care. Behind him, Sandra ran breathless, her heart pounding louder than the rubber soles of her slippers slapping the floor. "Emergency," Harrison barked. "She needs help now." The receptionist stood up so quickly her chair tipped. "Right away, sir," she stammered, pressing a button. Within seconds, a team of nurses appeared, pushing a gurney. Harrison gently laid Madame Sarah down, brushing a wet strand of gray hair from her forehead. "Her name is Sarah," he said quickly. "Please, save her." Doctors nodded. "Sir, give us a moment." They wheeled her away, and the door slammed shut behind them. The hallway grew quiet. Sandra leaned against the wall, her breathing ragged. Harrison stood still, fists clenched, staring at the door. His jaw was tight, his eyes unreadable. After a long silence, Sandra spoke. "Do you know her?" Harrison didn't look at her right away. I owe her everything. Sandra blinked. He turned to face her. When I was a boy, he said, I lived under the Eco Bridge. After my parents died, I had nothing. I begged for food, slept on cardboard. Most people passed me like I was invisible. His voice shook just a little, but she didn't. Sandra listened, unmoving. She found me there one day, brought me pap and Accra, then came back again and again. She found out I used to go to school before I dropped out. She paid my WAC fee. She told me I was smart. She said my life wasn't over, even if it looked like it. He paused, swallowed. She disappeared years later. I searched. I asked everyone, but I never found her. His voice softened. Until your post. Sandra's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, still dirty from the shelter floor. I didn't know, she said. But you helped her anyway, Harrison replied. You gave her shelter. You risked everything for a stranger. Sandra looked away. I lost my job because of it. Harrison frowned. What? My boss. She saw me on the CCTV, helping Mama Sarah. Said I was wasting her time. She slapped me, threw me out. Rage flickered across Harrison's face. She punished you for being decent? Sandra shrugged, trying to stay composed. It's fine. I would do it again. No, Harrison said firmly. It's not fine. Sandra, he paused. You're not alone anymore. Before she could answer, the door opened. A doctor stepped out. Harrison was at his side in an instant. How is she? She's alive, the doctor said, but weak. Severe dehydration. Malnourished. Her heart's strained from the stress. Sandra exhaled deeply. She'll need days of rest and monitoring, the doctor continued. We've stabilized her. Thank you, Harrison said, his voice cracking. The doctor gave a tired smile. You can see her soon. When he left, Harrison leaned against the wall, finally letting out the breath he'd been holding. Sandra stood beside him, unsure whether to speak. He looked at her again. She's going to live, he whispered. Sandra smiled faintly. Thank God. 2 days passed. Madame Sarah opened her eyes to soft light and the faint beeping of machines. Sandra was asleep on a chair, her head tilted to one side. Harrison sat beside her bed, holding her hand gently. Mama Sarah, he whispered. Her eyes moved. Slowly, they found his face. Harrison, she said, voice hoarse. He smiled through tears. Yes, Mama. I'm here. She looked around the room. Where am I? A hospital, he said softly. Safe. And alive. She glanced at Sandra, sleeping uncomfortably in the chair. She stayed. She saved you. Tears filled the old woman's eyes. I thought I'd die on that mat. You won't die, Harrison said. Not on my watch. When Sarah was discharged, Harrison didn't take her back to the streets. He took her, and Sandra, to his mansion. Not a house. A fortress. White pillars, glass balconies, gardens that looked like they were drawn by hand. Sandra stepped out of the SUV, frozen in place. She looked down at her slippers, ashamed. Sir, I can't stay here, she whispered. You can, Harrison said. You already are. Madame Sarah looked up at the gates, her eyes misting. This place. You deserve it, Harrison said. Both of you. Servants rushed out to greet them. The head chef bowed. The housekeeper gave Sandra a warm smile. Guards nodded respectfully. No one looked down on them. For the first time in years, Sandra didn't feel invisible. That night, Harrison asked Sandra to join him on the balcony. The city lights sparkled below. A warm breeze danced through the air. The smell of garden flowers drifted in. He handed her a glass of water and nodded toward a bench. Tell me about your life, he said. Sandra hesitated. Then she breathed out. My parents died when I was 15. I lived with an aunt for a while, but she threw me out. I cleaned houses to survive. Still finished school. Studied accounting. She looked at her hands. But no one would hire me. No references. No connections. Harrison stared at her. You're an accountant? Yes, she said shyly. I was top of my class. He stood up slowly. You're exactly what my company needs. Sandra blinked. What? You'll work at my company. Assistant accountant. Her heart stopped. Me? This isn't pity, he said. This is what good people deserve. Sandra couldn't speak. Start Monday, Harrison smiled. If you're ready. She nodded quickly, eyes wet. I'm ready. Monday morning. Sandra stood outside the towering glass building of Andrews Global Holdings. Her navy blue dress fit perfectly. The maid had helped with her makeup. Her heels clicked softly as she walked. She felt different. Inside, she was greeted at reception and shown to the 8th floor. The accounting department. Mr. Coleman, the department head, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a kind smile, greeted her warmly. "You must be Sandra. I reviewed your school records. Impressive." Sandra flushed. "Thank you, sir." He showed her to her desk, explained the workflow, introduced her to the team. Most were kind, but not all. From across the room, a woman in expensive heels let out a mocking laugh. "So this is the maid the boss brought in," she said loudly. Several people turned. Some whispered. "I heard she used to scrub floors." The woman continued, smirking. "Now she'll balance company books?" Mr. Coleman frowned. "Grace, that's enough." Sandra swallowed hard. "It's okay, sir." But inside, her hands trembled. At noon, Mr. Coleman gave her a trial task. A complicated report with old discrepancies. Grace smirked from her corner. "Let's see what she does with that." Sandra sat at her desk, opened the file. For a moment, everything blurred. Then her training took over. The numbers made sense. Her fingers moved fast. Her brain clicked back into gear. 2 hours later, she walked to Mr. Coleman's office. "I'm done, sir." He opened the file. His eyebrows lifted. Then again. "Perfect," he said. "Absolutely perfect." He stood up. "Team," he called. "Our new assistant accountant just found an error we missed for 2 months." The room went quiet. Then, a ripple of surprised nods. Even Grace looked stunned. Sandra returned to her desk quietly, a shy smile blooming on her lips. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. The room went silent, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Harrison stood frozen at the foot of the bed. Sandra clutched Madame Sarah's trembling hands. The old woman stared at the open window like she'd just seen a ghost. "He's back," she repeated, her voice cracking. "He found me again." Sandra's chest tightened. "Mama, who wants to hurt you?" Madame Sarah closed her eyes tightly as tears spilled down her cheeks. Her lips trembled. Her hands gripped Sandra's fingers like lifelines. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you my story. About Dapo, the man who destroyed my life." Sandra's eyes widened. "The one from the shop?" "Yes," Madame Sarah said. "He was stealing from me. When I caught him, he didn't just run. He beat me. Took all the money I had that week. And when I tried to report him, he came back at night and said he would finish what he started." Harrison stepped forward slowly, his voice calm. "He followed you again?" "Yes," Madame Sarah said. "Everywhere. I ran from my house, from my shop. Every time I tried to rebuild my life, he showed up, always watching, always threatening. I thought I lost him. I haven't seen him in years." She looked toward the window, panic flaring in her eyes. "Until now." Sandra followed her gaze. The window was open. The curtains fluttered gently. Nothing more. But the cold air felt heavier. "He was there," Madame Sarah insisted. "I saw him standing under the tree by the fence. Same scar, same fire in his eyes." Harrison moved to the window and looked out. The guards were patrolling. Nothing suspicious. Still, he turned quickly. "I want extra guards posted tonight. On every corner. No one in or out without clearance." A security man nodded and rushed off. Sandra knelt beside Madame Sarah. "You're safe now. You're with us. No one can hurt you here." But Madame Sarah shook her head, eyes glassy. "You don't know him. He's not just a thief. He's not just a man. He's—" She stopped, mouth open as if the words wouldn't come. "He doesn't care about police or prison. He promised to finish me." Sandra stood up, her legs shaking. Then something clicked. A scar. The eyes. Fire. She'd seen him. Weeks ago, at a hospital, visiting someone. A man had shoved past her mother and taken something from her bag. That face, the same scar, deep across the left cheek. Sandra had never forgotten it. Her heart pounded. "I think I've seen him before, too," she whispered. Harrison turned. "Where?" "At Mercy Hospital." He was yelling at a nurse. Angry. Loud. Same scar. Same look in his eyes. Harrison's jaw clenched. "I need his full name," he said. "If he's back, I'm going to make sure he never gets close again. That night, the mansion was locked down like a fortress. Cameras were checked. Dogs released into the garden. Every window was locked. Armed guards patrolled the grounds. But inside, sleep didn't come easily. Sandra sat by Madame Sarah's bed, watching her chest rise and fall. Every creak in the hallway made her turn. Every shadow made her flinch. At 2:14 a.m., Harrison knocked gently and brought her tea. "You okay?" he asked softly. Sandra took the cup. "Not really." He sat beside her. "She's scared," Sandra said. "And when I look at her like that, I get scared too." "She saved me when I had nothing," Harrison said. "Now it's my turn to protect her." Sandra looked at him. "Why do people like Dapo always come back?" Harrison sipped the tea. "Because they think kindness is weakness." He set his cup down. But they're wrong. The next morning, Harrison made calls. By noon, he had a name. Dapo Alade. Arrested once for theft. Released after 3 weeks. No fixed address. No known relatives. A record of violence. Known to disappear and reappear across the city. The image they sent matched what Sandra remembered. Tall, sharp eyes, and the jagged scar on his left cheek. "That's him," she said quietly. Harrison called the commissioner himself. A formal investigation began that day. But he didn't stop there. He hired a private security team to track Dapo's movements. Meanwhile, life inside the mansion moved on. Madame Sarah slowly regained strength. She took walks in the garden with Sandra, ate better, laughed sometimes, though never for long. And Harrison, he was different around Sandra now. Gentler, present, always noticing. When she laughed, he looked up from his phone. When she entered a room, he stood. One evening, he found her in the garden after work, watching the flowers sway. "Have dinner with me tomorrow," he said. Sandra turned, surprised. "You mean like—" "Yes," he said simply. She smiled. "I'd like that." The dinner was simple, but beautiful. Candlelight, music in the background. Sandra wore a soft blue dress. Harrison, a crisp white shirt. They talked about everything and nothing. Books, favorite food, childhood dreams. For once, Sandra didn't feel like a maid or a guest. She felt equal. "Do you ever think," Harrison said, swirling his wine, "that some people are sent to us to change our direction?" Sandra tilted her head. "Like angels or mirrors," he said, "showing us who we could be." She smiled. "I think you were sent to her." "Madame Sarah." He looked at her seriously. "No," he said. "She was sent to me. You were sent to her." He paused. "And maybe now to me." Sandra blushed. But before she could answer, a guard rushed into the garden, breathless. "Sir, you need to see this." In the security room, the head guard pointed to the screen. A man stood across the street from the mansion, leaning on a wall, not moving, just staring. Even through the grainy footage, Sandra recognized the scar. Her blood ran cold. "It's him," she whispered. "That's Dapo." Harrison's voice dropped. "Zoom in." The man looked right at the camera and smiled, then walked away. An emergency team was dispatched. By the time they reached the spot, Dapo was gone. But he had left something behind. A small piece of paper tucked under the front gate. It read, "You took what was mine. You fed the wrong dog. This isn't over." Harrison crushed the note in his hand. "No more warnings," he said. "He wants war. He'll get one." Sandra stared at the gate. And for the first time since meeting Madame Sarah, she was truly afraid. Not just for herself, but for what was coming. The threat lingered like smoke in the air. After Dapo's note was found under the gate, the mansion became a fortress. Armed guards were posted at every corner. The dogs were released every night. Cameras scanned the perimeter on loop. But for Sandra, and especially for Madame Sarah, the fear wasn't in the walls. It was in the memory, in knowing what a man like Dapo was capable of. For days, Madame Sarah slept with one eye open. She jumped at small noises. Her laughter, which had just returned, disappeared again. And though Harrison tried to smile through it all, Sandra could see the tension in his shoulders. He barely left the house, barely ate, barely slept. Sandra sat beside him on the balcony one night. The air smelled like rain and roses. The city blinked below. "Do you ever get tired of fixing everything?" she asked. He didn't look at her right away. "Yes," he said finally, "but I'd never forgive myself if I didn't." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Then you're not fixing it alone anymore. 3 days later, the private investigators called. They found Dapo. He was hiding in an old warehouse on the mainland, abandoned, moldy, reeking of gasoline and sweat. The location hit harder than they expected. It used to be Madame Sarah's first shop, the very place he had destroyed her life. Now, he was using it as a hiding place. A message. "This man is obsessed," Harrison said, pacing the room. "He's not just dangerous. He's personal. I want to see him," Madame Sarah said from her chair. Everyone turned. Sandra's eyes widened. "Mama, no. He's violent. I want to look him in the eyes," the old woman said firmly. "I've run enough. I have something to say." They left that night. 2 black SUVs. Harrison, Sandra, Madame Sarah, and 4 armed men. The warehouse loomed ahead like a broken monument. Rusted roof, shattered windows, and graffiti crawling across the walls. The air smelled like wet cement. They stepped inside. The first thing Sandra noticed was the silence. Not peaceful, just waiting. And then he appeared. Dapo, leaning against a metal pillar, smoking a cigarette. His eyes met Madame Sarah's first, then Harrison's, then Sandra's. He smiled slowly. Well, he said. "The ghost comes walking." He dropped the cigarette and stepped forward, unbothered by the guns. "You people think money can buy safety," he sneered. "You think she deserves peace? After what she did?" "What she did," Harrison repeated, stepping forward. "You beat her, stole from her, hunted her." Dapo chuckled. "She embarrassed me. She made me beg like a dog. I gave her loyalty. She gave me shame. You gave me bruises," Madame Sarah said suddenly, her voice hard as stone. "You gave me scars. You gave me fear." Dapo stopped. She stepped forward, slowly, leaning on Sandra's arm. "But I'm still standing," she said. "You tried to bury me, but I grew." His expression twisted. "I should have finished the job," he hissed. He lunged, but Harrison's men were faster. Guns raised, shouted commands. Dapo dropped to the floor as they tackled him, arms pinned behind his back. Even then, he grinned. "This isn't over," he growled. "You think this ends with handcuffs?" "No," Harrison said quietly. "It ends with justice." The trial lasted 6 weeks. Sandra attended every day. So did Harrison. So did Madame Sarah, even when she had to be wheeled in. The court heard everything. The theft, the assault, the threats, the years of stalking. Other victims came forward. Dapo's record stretched longer than anyone knew. On the final day, the judge looked him straight in the eyes. "People like you," she said, "don't fear the law, but maybe now you will respect it. 20 years. No parole." Dapo didn't smile this time as they took him away. Peace returned slowly. The guards remained, but the tension didn't. The house felt lighter. Laughter came back. The garden bloomed again. Sandra woke one morning and realized she hadn't dreamed of fear. That day, Harrison asked her to take a walk. It wasn't fancy, just them on the back lawn under soft yellow light. Madame Sarah sat in a chair on the patio, wrapped in a shawl, sipping tea, watching with that knowing look in her eyes. "Sandra," Harrison said, stopping under a tree. "I've been thinking." She smiled. "That's dangerous." He laughed, then grew serious. "I thought I was saving you when I brought you here," he said. "But the truth is you saved us. Me, her, yourself." He reached into his pocket. She gasped before he even opened the box. A silver ring. Simple. Beautiful. "I don't care about what people say. I don't care that we met like this. I just care that when you look at people, you see them. Not their status. Not their money. You see them." He knelt on one knee. "Sandra, will you marry me?" She covered her mouth with both hands, then nodded through tears. "Yes. Yes. Of course, yes." 2 months later, they married. It was beautiful, but quiet, just close friends, loyal staff, and family. No headlines. No photographers. The most powerful moment wasn't Harrison's vows. It was when Madame Sarah, strong and glowing, walked Sandra down the aisle. Hand in hand, mother and daughter, by choice, not blood. Years passed. They built a life. A true one. Sandra didn't just become Harrison's wife. She became a partner in the company. She ran the charity arm, opened shelters for homeless women, scholarships for orphans, medical centers in forgotten areas. She made sure no one who was ever invisible stayed that way. Madame Sarah became the soul of their home, telling stories, guiding decisions, praying over the house every night. But one shadow remained. No children. Sandra tried. They both did. Doctors said they were healthy, just unlucky. At first, they were hopeful, then confused, then quietly broken. Some nights, Sandra cried into Harrison's chest. Other nights, they sat on the balcony, holding hands in silence. One night, Sandra said, "Maybe this is enough. You, me, Mama Sarah. Maybe that's the blessing." Harrison kissed her forehead. "Maybe, but I still pray." And then, the miracle. Sandra stood in the bathroom, shaking, staring at a small stick. 2 pink lines. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She just sank to the floor, crying in her hands. That evening, she showed Harrison the test. He went still, then slowly knelt and placed his forehead on her stomach. 9 months later, a girl was born. They named her Mercy, because it wasn't luck. It wasn't magic. It was grace. Unseen but always watching. When Mercy turned 3, Sandra sat her down and told her story. About a rainy day, an old woman, a decision that changed everything. Mercy listened with wide eyes, clutching a small toy. "And what happened to the bad man?" she asked. "He went away," Sandra said softly. "Because kindness is stronger than fear." Mercy blinked. "Like your kindness?" Sandra smiled. "No," she whispered. "Like Madame Sarah's. And yours." One day, she pulled her daughter close. And as the evening sun warmed the room, Sandra realized something. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of everything that mattered.